Happy New Year, everybody. We're starting off the year very strong with the halfway point of our Zelda Marathon. Majora's Mask is a Zelda game I was slightly interested in after playing games like Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess, but it was something I never got around to for the longest time. After watching a few videos and playthroughs of the game on YouTube, I decided to give the game a shot with a 3DS remake in 2015. Eventually I got to go back and play the original version via that Zelda collection I talked about last time, and from that playthrough on, I fell in love. Like Ocarina of Time, I'll be playing the Switch Online version using the re-released Nintendo 64 controller. I was made aware by my buddy Kat Bergerson that this controller has more sensitivity in the control stick compared to the original controller. I tested this out for myself since I actually got an N64 for Christmas this year, but that's not Zelda. Okay, let me just take a look and see if I can find a real cartridge and...
Oh my goodness! Squidward!
It's no secret to say that Ocarina of Time was a massive success for Nintendo and the N64. The game sold 2.5 million units alone in the last 6 weeks of 1998. The question now for the team at Nintendo was how were they going to go about creating a follow-up to Ocarina of Time. Majora's Mask was originally revealed under the name of Yura Zelda and was going to be a revamped version of Ocarina of Time with new dungeon layouts, which is speculated to be what the Master Quest mode for the GameCube release became. This project was originally planned for the Nintendo 64 disk drive, an add-on for the console released exclusively in Japan. And considering the 64DD only ever had 10 pieces of software released for it, it was safe to say that it was dead upon arrival.
And here he... Oh dear.
Oh no, did Dave not make it?
Eiji Aonuma, who was originally a dungeon designer during Ocarina of Time's development, wanted to create a new game for the base Nintendo 64, and Miyamoto granted that request, but Aonuma and his team had less than a year to develop the whole game. With a smaller team and a smaller time limit for the project, now director Eiji Aonuma knew that a smaller scope was needed, and pressure was already on the team when it came to making a follow-up to something like Ocarina of Time. With the help of Yoshiaki Koizumi as the second director, the idea for the 3-day cycle and the main objective of the game, stopping the moon from falling, were introduced. Majora's Mask did reuse some assets from Ocarina of Time, but it was also the second of 2 games on the N64 to utilize the expansion pack, which provided additional RAM to the console to use higher quality models and textures. Majora's Mask was released on April 27, 2000 and was received well by critics.
For fans, however, it was initially considered a departure from what many loved about Zelda. It was like that in the past anyways. Now many fans like myself consider Majora's Mask to be one of the best games in the series. But why is that exactly? What was it that Majora's Mask did that Ocarina of Time didn't do that made it so beloved by so many to this day? Well, before we get into that, we have a plot to summarize, so let's hop on into the plot of The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask.
Okay, now let me see here. Well, last time Link defeated Ganon, and with the help of the sages, Zelda was able to seal him within the Sacred Realm. Zelda sends Link back in time to get his childhood back. Navi pisses off for parts unknown, and Link meets with the younger Zelda in the courtyard for Chinese food. The moment that Link was sent back in time, however, created a split in the timeline, with one split continuing on with adult Zelda in a world without the Hero of Time, which we'll talk about next video, and the other split following young Link with all the knowledge of future events. Zelda and the king are made aware of Ganondorf's plot to take the Triforce, and sometime afterwards, Link sets out for a secret and personal journey to find his friend Navi. Months have passed since then, and with his trusty steed Epona by his side, Link ventures into a mysterious forest where the two fairies Tattle and Tail spook Epona enough to knock Link off of her back, rendering him unconscious.
Well, tell Ronnie you got knocked the fuck out!
A skull kid wearing a mysterious mask shows up and pilfers the Ocarina of Time from Link, and while making the same noise a middle schooler makes when somebody says penis, Link wakes up and attempts to get the instrument back. The Skull Kid hijacks Epona with Link giving chase, eventually getting tossed like an unwanted gift card from the Gap. Link chases them through the forest and ends up falling down this giant tree stump, and after a quick trip through N64 Rainbow Road, Link is transported into Termina, a sort of parallel dimension to Hyrule. The Skull Kid laughs at Link for even thinking he can stop him, and transforms Link into a Deku Scrub.
My dick fell off!
The Skull Kid leaves and Tattle ends up getting separated from her brother. She makes a temporary truce with Link to get back to Tail, and the two make their way to the insides of the clock tower where they are greeted by the Happy Mask Salesman, the very same from Ocarina of Time. The salesman tells Link that if he can get his instrument back, he can return Link to normal. In exchange, he requests Link to get his mask back, and that he only has 72 hours to do so. Upon leaving the clock tower, the duo discover why they have a time limit. The Masked Skull Kid has caused the moon to slowly fall towards Termina, and in 3 days, the moon will crash and kill everyone in the land. shit. You can't really do much as a Deku scrub. You're not allowed to leave, and everyone either ignores you or has very hurtful things to say. With some assistance from the Great Fairy, Link and Tattle are able to find a way to get to the top of the clock tower mere minutes before the moon falls. The pair encounters the Skull Kid, and Tail attempts to summon 4 beings from across Termina, before Skull Kid puts him in line. With a well-aimed loogie, Link manages to retrieve the Ocarina of Time and is rushed with memories of Princess Zelda, who reminds Link of the Song of Time. With no other options, Link plays the Song of Time, and him and Tattle return to the beginning of the 3-day cycle. Our heroes return to the Happy Mask Salesman, who teaches Link the Song of Healing that transforms him back to normal. Link did get the mask back, however, and the salesman begins to have a nervous breakdown. He goes to explain that the mask, which is known as Majora's Mask, was an ancient artifact used by a dark tribe during hexing rituals, and has the power to destroy the planet. It was sealed away in fear of its power, but was found some time ago by the salesman, and is horrified at the fact that Mr. Giddyfuck is in possession with the mask's horrible power. Link promises the salesman to get his mask back, and him and Tattle set out to rescue the 4 beings Tail was trying to summon, the 4 giants of Termina, who are essentially the guardian deities of the land. Link sets out for the 4 separate regions of Termina, only to discover each one is suffering from some sort of plague thanks to Skull Kid and the Majora's Mask. The swamp is filled with poison water, the mountains are suffering from a massive blizzard, the waters of Great Bay are becoming more dangerous, and the souls of Ikana Valley are unable to rest, causing essentially a condensed zombie apocalypse. Link and Tattle venture through the 4 dungeons in Termina, defeating the bosses and releasing the giants from their bonds, helping people throughout the land along the way. Eventually, Link and Tattle return to the top of the clock tower on the night of the final day and summon the giants to catch the moon from falling down completely. The Skull Kid is stopped and Tattle is reunited with her brother, until Majora's Mask reveals itself and is hell-bent on crashing the moon into the planet. Link along with Tattle enter the moon to confront Majora and are greeted with a wide green open field. What the fuck? Link encounters these children wearing the faces of the bosses Link fought in the various dungeons and gives them all the masks he's collected until the only child left is the one wearing Majora's mask. Majora reveals that his intentions aren't based in petty revenge or so-called salvation. Rather, the whole reason he's doing everything is because he sees it as some sort of game. What an asshole. If you collect all the masks in the game at this point, this is where Majora will give you the Fierce Deity's mask before the final battle. Oh, okay, so he's an asshole and he's also stupid. Link faces off against Majora and comes out triumphant, but let's be fair, you kinda have to try and not to lose this fight. The moon returns to the sky and peace is restored to Termina. The mask salesman takes the now powerless Majora's Mask, and Adobe Premiere dissolves his way into parts unknown. Link bids farewell to Tattle, Tail, and the reformed Skull Kid, and returns to the world above to continue his personal journey, ending Majora's Mask. I have quite the fondness for this story, even though there really isn't too much going on. Much like Link's Awakening, the different setting allows for the story to shine on its own without needing to use the classic Zelda staples for its narrative. There's no Demon King to defeat, no Princess of Destiny to save, no Triforce to discover. It's relatively straightforward at the end of the day. Here's the bad guy, go fuck him up, save the people. By itself, the plot is structured in no more complexity than, say, Link to the Past or Ocarina of Time, and while the main story itself is rather elementary, there's so much more to it than that. Okay, so you have the 3-day time limit and you have to complete the dungeons to save the world, right? Well, you can technically get away with doing that bare minimum and go straight to Majora, but then you're missing out on a majority of the game. Majora's Mask has a shit ton of side quests, which is where you're going to be getting a major bulk of your gameplay. There are tons of time-sensitive events centered around the people and locations in Termina, and almost everyone will have some sort of set schedule that they follow. For example, Kei-Fei will always get his mail first thing in the morning on the first day, and Gorman the troop leader is always going to the mayor's office right when it opens at 10. The people you meet during your quest makes this world feel more alive than almost any other Zelda. Sometimes helping people can be as simple as popping balloons, giving out potions, or playing minigames. While there are many times that these people can make this world feel alive, there are some instances where it paints Termina in an extremely creepy light. Tons of side quests you encounter have you dealing with a lot of adult themes. You know, like death. Vaya con Dios. If you're not dying in Termina, you're either scarred for life or straight up lobotomized. The Romani Ranch is an area you can normally only visit on the final day, and seeing the young Romani completely out of it gives you the idea that something's just not right here. When you return at an earlier point in the time cycle with the means to open the entrance, you discover that the ranch was invaded by these ghostly aliens who abducted the cows, and poor Romani was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Dare I mention the young girl Pamela, who locked her father in a closet with bujiak paper because he was cursed to become a Gibdo? How about Kei-Fei, who was transformed into a child and gets his engagement mask stolen before he's supposed to get married? Maybe Lulu, who lost her voice because the Gerudo pirate stole her children from her? Or maybe the Deku butler, who discovers the corpse of his dead child in the credits. Let's not forget the Goron warrior Darmani and the Zora guitarist Mikau, because they're dead. But while the majority of Termina is, well, for lack of a better term, fucked, there's always a moment that brings some levity to certain characters' dilemmas. Helping Crimea deliver the milk to Clocktown nets Link the Romani mask, but doing the side quest a second time gets you a hug from her. Seeing Pamela and her father hug after you cure him, Keife reuniting with fiancé Anju just before the moon crashes, and even things like the bartender at the milk bar having regrets of not seeing his favorite customer before the inevitable, and then I walked into the bar, is just so heartwarming. The game does a great job at giving characters likable and engaging personalities and fun dialogue throughout to keep me entertained. Everything with the Happy Mask Salesman is a perfect example of why that's the case. I want to help the people of Termina because of things like that. It doesn't matter that Link isn't more emotionally involved like in Ocarina of Time, although I will say he does get some funny faces at certain moments. That doesn't matter because I personally have that connection with these people, and there are times the game will pull at your heartstrings. It's an engaging narrative where the world is the protagonist, and I love that. It's not perfect, no piece of media is, but this is pretty damn close. Well, before I start getting sappy, let's hop into the gameplay. To do that, I think we first need to talk about this big old clock at the bottom of the screen. Time is always moving in Termina, and never will the clock stop, and once it hits the end of day 3... yeah, that. A complete 3-day cycle lasts a little under an hour in real life, but before you panic, know that you don't have to do absolutely everything in one cycle. Playing the Song of Time will reset the cycle back to the dawn of the first day, so if you need more time to do a particular activity, or if you've done everything you can possibly do in that cycle, or if you fucked up which day you're supposed to do the Gold Skullshell house like I did, you can play the song and restart the timeline. Your main goal is to travel to each region and defeat the temple's bosses to collect their remains and release the giants, and while you don't need to complete all 4 dungeons in one cycle to beat the game, you will need to complete all 4 before encountering Skull Kid on the night of the final day. Playing the Song of Time in different ways will affect the clock variously. Playing the song backwards will slow the timer down significantly, so if you feel pressured by the small amount of time as it is, this will alleviate a large amount of stress. Playing the Song of Double Time will move the clock forward to either 6 PM of the current day or 6 AM of the next day, and if that's too imprecise for you, you could speak to Andrew's grandmother to move in 2-hour increments. This might sound obvious, but just do yourself a favor and don't let the moon crash into Termina, because not only do you, well, die, but you also lose all the progress that you made in that 3-day cycle. During the recording sessions for this video, I started near the beginning of the cycle to do the Stone Tower Temple in one cycle, with the Reverse Song of Time active. I did the dungeon, beat the boss, dropped off the stray fairies, and did one more side quest before parking myself right outside of the clock tower on the night of the final day. I had to go run an errand for my mother, and being the dumbass I was, I forgot to pause the game, and the moment that I sat back down to continue playing the game, the moon crashed into Termina. I died, and I got sent back to the beginning of the 3-day cycle with none of my progress saved. Granted, that's my fault for being an absolute dipshit, but I tell you this because you can't drop your guard with Majora's Mask. You need to be smart with the decisions you make during that particular cycle. You can only save through playing the Song of Time and restarting the cycle, but you do have these owl statues that can do a temporary save if you need to go and do something else right away. The save will be gone once you reload the save file since, it's temporary. So keep both of these things in mind as well as everything I've already said about the 3-day cycle. You need to make sure you can do everything you plan within the time you're given. Like I mentioned earlier, Link's goal is to travel to the 4 regions of Termina and release the 4 imprisoned giants. That means there are only 4 main dungeons in the entire game. You're only getting 4 complete heart containers throughout your adventure, so if you want a better chance of survival, you gotta collect some of the 52 heart pieces. Unlike Link's Awakening HD though, these feel more natural to collect as you progress throughout the game. There are plenty of side quests and minigames to do if you want to collect heart pieces and other collectibles, and it is super easy to fund your many attempts because of how easy it is to get rupees. Some minigames that span over a 3-day cycle will net you 50 rupees on day 1 and 2, and there are also a few chests around Clocktown with large sums of rupees inside. There's also a bank that you can deposit rupees in, which even stay there when you reset time, which is nice, but I don't get why that is. Because you lose perishable items like arrows, bombs, anything inside of bottles, and rupees inside your fucking pocket. The Goddess of Time is a picky fuck. If you're worried about your lost perishables, it's extremely easy to replenish your stock upon a reset, since there are plenty of circles of bushes right outside of Clocktown that you can use to fill up on at a time. Seeing as the game is running on the same engine as Ocarina of Time, Link controls about the same as he did previously, but now when he jumps across gaps he does flippy flips and T-poses to assert dominance. Link's arsenal is about the same with some exclusions like the Megaton Hammer, the boot upgrades, the goddess abilities, and most of the kit Link had as a child in Ocarina of Time. I'm still at least glad I get to mess around with items like the bow, bombs, the hook shots, the Deku sticks. They didn't fix the sticks. Link is a bit more experienced since his time in the future, and now he's able to wield things like the Hylian shield and the bow with ease. On top of all the returning items you've collected, as well as heart pieces and ammunition upgrades, you're just collecting a whole lot of masks throughout the game. So many so there's a whole page just for masks this time around. You have some masks that only fill out one use and then they sit there in your inventory, but you also have some that have plenty of uses. The bomb mask will let you explode stuff, essentially giving you infinite bombs. The Romani mask grants you access to the milk bar to purchase Chateau Romani, which gives you infinite magic for the remainder of the 3-day cycle, and the stone mask, which makes you invisible to enemies, which makes stealth sections a complete joke.
Gotcha, bitch!
If you raise this guy's baby chicks into full-grown cuckoos, you get the bunny hood that doubles your ground speed. This, along with a few other things you get later in the game, makes traveling around Termina a complete non-issue. The most important masks that you can get are the transformation variety, and while you only get 4 of them throughout your adventure, they are not only required to progress through the major parts of the game, but are also really fucking fun. Once you learn the Song of Healing from the Happy Mask Salesman, your Deku form is transformed into a mask for Link to transform back into whenever he would like. Eventually, you'll also get the Goron mask and the Zora mask, which transforms Link into a Goron and a Zora respectively. These transformations aren't just skins though, they all have their own strengths and abilities. The Deku Scrub lets Link utilize these launch flowers to glide around high areas and reach a higher ground. And you could also drop Deku Nuts like bombs and it can skip across water. You could also shoot snot bubbles. Gross. The Goron uses its raw strength in combat and gives Link a hard-hitting ground pound to hit switches and Goomba Stomp Dynalphos. Goron Link can also use some magic to rev up and roll around at blazing speeds. This alone makes traveling around Termina a complete non-issue, and for those who are worried, I feel that it doesn't completely invalidate things like the Bunny Hood and the returning Epona, but rather it complements them. The Zora mask improves Link's underwater traversal. He can sink down to the seafloor like Iron Boots, he can dolphin swim, which feels good. He's got an electric barrier as a perfect damaging tool, and as far as combat goes, he's got martial arts and boomerang fins. Like I mentioned earlier, you can also get the Fierce Deity mask from Majora before the final boss fight, and while you can only use this thing in boss fights, you honestly have to try to get yourself killed. You got the strongest blade in the game, and you can shoot out magic light beams that do the same amount of damage as your regular sword swings. Putting gameplay aside, this form is so badass for Link. It's such a cool take on the design for him, and I got giddier than a schoolgirl when I found out you could play as him in Hyrule Warriors. I'm hoping that, like Breath of the Wild, you can wear the Fierce Deity armor for Tears of the Kingdom. Traveling around the map is now easier than ever before. What really helps is how close everything is to each other. Compared to Hyrule in the last game, Termina is very compact and condensed in size. You could be heading towards the Ikana Canyon 1 second and then make a quick turn and immediately be near the entrance of Snowhead. It also helps that each area in Termina Field has clear distinctions and recognizable landmarks around, so you won't get too lost when progressing through the game. Like I mentioned earlier, there are these owl statues scattered around that you can teleport to with the Song of Soaring. Yeah, one teleportation song. Thank you. To me, this is perfect. I can get right to where I'm going when I'm getting some of these side quests done. It's an absolute godsend. Before getting to the dungeons, there are some things that Link is tasked with doing before he can even approach them, like infiltrating the Deku Palace, putting a baby to sleep, saving Zora eggs, or putting spirits to rest from an ancient kingdom.
Excuse me, sir. Do you have Prince Albert in a can? You do? Well, you better let the poor guy out.
Once a dungeon is completed, the surrounding area will change and new side quests will open up. You can refight the boss in another cycle thanks to these teleportation platforms, so if you need to go back and defeat, say, Goat or Odawa, you can teleport right to them and fuck them up a little bit. There was nothing in the box. Because of there only being 4 dungeons, most of the items you gather this time around are mainly found outside of the dungeons. You're primarily getting the different arrow types in the dungeons, like the regular bow and arrows, the fire arrows, the ice arrows, which are awesome in this game, and the light arrows, which I don't know who was the genius that left these in a box, but thank you, buddy. I now crave destruction.
Oh, damn.
Setup for dungeons is about the same, but now you can collect these 15 stray fairies to bring to the nearby fairy fountain and get some upgrades from the great fairies. Things like double magic, double defense, as well as the big-ass Great Fairy Sword are very nice additions to my kit. I dub ye the Blade of Bipedal Lizard's Bane. The stray fairies aren't necessary to complete the dungeon, and if you really wanted to, you could come back in another cycle and grab them, but I do recommend grabbing them when you first get inside. Woodfall Temple is a nice starting dungeon. I don't think it has anything that makes it really stand out compared to other dungeons, but it's got a nice layout and great starting puzzles. I was nervous when first playing through the Snowhead Temple because it reminds me a lot of the Ice Palace from A Link to the Past, but in comparison this place is an absolute breeze. I will say falling down to a lower level can be a major pain in the ass, especially when going for the stray fairies. Okay, let's talk about the Great Bay Temple, because I know there are many who view this as worse than the Water Temple. And honestly, I don't see it. Yeah, it's long. Yeah, it can be confusing. Yeah, it's somewhat easy to get lost. Would I rather deal with the Great Bay Temple than the Water Temple? Yes! It doesn't matter that you have to push gears quite often, and it doesn't matter that traversal for certain puzzles can be a pain. I'm not playing a dinky song every 5 feet to raise and lower the water level, and I'm not constantly going into the menu to switch out my Jordans. It's really not that bad. I will say the ice arrows help a bit with that. You can shoot them into the water to create ice platforms and freeze water wheels, which I love. Stray fairies can kiss my ass though. Stone Tower is a great final dungeon. I like how you go through the dungeon relatively normal, and then when you get the light arrows, you flip the whole temple upside down to finish the rest of it. A good lineup of dungeons overall, but I don't know if I can say the same for the boss fights. Odalwa starts things off pretty strong, and is actually a challenging first boss comparing him to previous games, and of course I find his dancing hilarious. I'm very easy to entertain. In Snowhead, you have to fight this giant mechanical beast named Goat. What's with this series having hard to pronounce names? Is it Goat or Got? Either way, this is a really fun boss fight. You chase him around a circular arena using your rolling Goron move, and I get much entertainment from weaving around pillars, bombs, and lightning bolts. You do have to fight Goat the most if you want to complete everything in the game, but at least I get to fight a fun boss over and over again. I'm sorry, buddy, but you need to die. Then there's Great Bay's boss, where the quality nosedives. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Yorg. He's an asshole. Twinwell can be fought either by launching light arrows at him or by using the Giant's Mask you get right outside the boss door. You can't Z-target it and cost magic, but it's a lot easier to hit them this way. Then there's the boss fight with Majora, which goes down like an absolute pushover with the Fierce Deity's Mask and some alcoholic milk. Yes, it's alcoholic because poor Luigi over here can barely speak.
I'll take a milk.
Without the Fierce Deity's Mask, the fight's still kind of easy thanks to light arrows and the Great Fairy Sword, so if you do want to actually get a challenge from this boss, you gotta limit yourself a little bit. I do still kind of like the boss because of how wacky this thing can get, especially phase 2 because the mask grows arms and legs and goes apeshit. Motherfucker runs around like a kid coked up on Chug Jug, and he casually does the Codsec and moonwalks over to steal your girl. Majora is a suave motherfucker, if anything. The third form has the boss Hulk out and use whips, but yeah, nothing really comes from that. It's easier than both the previous phases. Graphically, this is definitely the superior game. Like I mentioned earlier, Majora's Mask uses the N64's expansion pack that allows it to run higher quality textures and models, and it gets a lot of use out of it. Termina is so visually distinct compared to Hyrule. It's much more colorful for starters. Colors are vibrant, every area you go through is pleasing to the eye. Some models are reused from the last game, but it also sort of plays into the storytelling. Termina is an alternate dimension of Hyrule, so while you may remember some of those faces from Ocarina of Time, they're completely different people. Except for maybe Kaepora Gaebora, who luckily doesn't interrupt you as often and even gives you the lens of truth. You know what? You're pretty alright, Mr. Gaebora. I didn't need to deal with your bullshit 3 times in a row, though. Fuck you, Dompe! Musically speaking, though, damn! I fucking love this soundtrack. You got a couple returning pieces from last time, like Saria's song, the ranch theme, Goron City's, and Zora's Domain's theme, but the rest of the soundtrack is full of amazing compositions once again provided by the brilliant Koji Kondo. Jesus, everything this guy touches absolute fire? The soundtrack also has a great balance of having atmospherically rich pieces, while also giving said pieces catchy melodies that I find myself constantly humming. I know Termina Field's theme is just a new rendition of the main Zelda theme, but I love this version so much. Clock Town, the Deku Palace, the Pirate Base, Akana Castle, Stone Tower, the boss theme, and the main Ocarina songs are all great, but my all-time favorite theme in this game is the Oath to Order. I love this piece, and it ranks top 5 in my best of Zelda songs. This song alone makes me wish we had Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask HD remakes with orchestrated soundtracks, but unfortunately I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. Majora's Mask is a game I can talk about for hours on end without repeating myself. Its story, characters, setting, gameplay, music, and atmosphere are near perfect, and never am I against doing another playthrough. The only big problem I have with the game is, honestly, its opening. I think that it can be a bit confusing for new players to get into, but if you can manage to get through it, the game gets so much better. Maybe 1 or 2 side quests could have been adjusted here and there, but the game cuts the bullshit for sure. I can safely rank this as my favorite game in the series. I love this game. and I hope you do too if you decide to give it a try if you haven't done so already. It's available on the expansion pass for Switch Online, and it's also on the Wii U's Virtual Console, so get it while you still can. If you have the budget for it though, I would still recommend hunting down an original cartridge to play on an actual N64. I was actually planning on talking a bit about Majora's Mask 3D at the end of this video, but I decided against it. I think this is a situation where I would need to make a review entirely on this version of the game, because compared to something like Ocarina of Time 3D, I have a lot more opinions about this version of the game. If I can manage to get a 3DS capture card sometime in the future, or if I can get 3DS emulation figured out to make it look as smooth as possible, then this will be the first game I look at. As far as I'm aware though, 3DS emulation isn't quite there yet, so that may be later rather than sooner, but we'll see.
And that ends the halfway mark for our Zelda Marathon. Now, this next game is one I've been the most curious about going back to out of every other Zelda game I do for this series. Whatever my opinion comes out, good or bad, is just something we'll have to look out for soon enough. Okay, I'm taking this off. It's way too... That's better. Well, for next time, we're going to be dusting off our Nintendo Wii U's and taking a look at the HD remaster of The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. So, if you guys like Majora's Mask, if you have any interesting stories or things you want to talk about the game, let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to read a couple of them, and consider giving the video a like and subscribe if you want to see more Zelda content. So, like I said, I'll see you guys next time with The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker. Again, Happy New Year, and I'll see you guys next time.